There's a genre of movies I like to nickname called white people solving racism movies. What I mean by that is that there are movies created by white people, written by white people, directed by white people, and usually starring white people that are movies about dealing with race and how to fix them. The problem with these movies is that they're extremely out of touch with the subject they're dealing with and often ignore the minorities that are supposed to be represented on this matter, with the message and themes of the movie completely missing the mark. You may be thinking to yourself, but wait, aren't you doing the same thing right now? You're a white guy as well. Well, first off, I'm Polish. And second, while you're right, unlike the people who made these movies, I want to dive into more depth when it comes to this genre of movies and show why they missed the mark entirely. There's another genre trope very similar to this, but have some slight differences that make them stand out. That being the white savior trope in film, which is basically a white guy rushes in and helps save the minorities. While they are very similar, 90% of white savior films would fall into this category of white people solving racism films, and vice versa. But there are two specific examples that show key differences. The first is Avatar, which is essentially a science fiction white savior movie. But Avatar isn't really solving racism. There are many themes and messages in the film, but solving racism wasn't James Cameron's goal when creating this film. After all, humans don't really treat the Na'vi like an inferior race, but just as a stronger opposing force that they have to fight back. On the other hand, One Battle After Another from last year is a white people solving racism movie. Paul Thomas Anderson is a white guy after all, but it also really isn't a white savior film. Aside from Bob, the lead white guy, he's incompetent the whole way through. Every other white character is a villain, usually supporting racist ideas. The minority groups in the film, Willa, Deandra, Sensei Sergio, and the rest, are the ones who are actually fighting against the force. No white savior in sight. With that out of the way, I'll be talking about three white savior movies. Ones that won Best Picture and were acclaimed upon release, but years later have been more reassessed more negatively, deservingly so. In chronological order, let's talk about white people solving racism movies and why they seem to fall apart for the most part. The first of these films is Driving Miss Daisy. This drama film follows Daisy, an old Jewish lady in the South whose son hires a chauffeur for her after she crashes her car, a black man named Hoke, as the two's bond grows closer and closer as they age. From a filmmaking standpoint, Driving Miss Daisy has aged like milk, feeling more like a made-for-TV movie than an actual award-winning film. The direction, screenplay, and technical aspects are completely standard and unordinary, and feel like such a product from the 80s. And the acting is fine as well, the highlight being Morgan Freeman, a common theme we'll see later on. Freeman is very likable and friendly all throughout. There's literally not a single reason not to like him. This is a common trope in these types of movies. After all, if a minority group is sweet and completely harmless, why should we be racist towards them? This results in very flat characters like Hope, completely one-dimensional and feeling more like an alien species than an actual human being you would encounter in real life. The writers writing these films seem to have no experience when writing non-white characters, and the result is very standard characters of what they would imagine a minority to be. Driving Miss Daisy is rated PG. As a result, it can discuss darker topics of race, and that really holds back the film because of that. The American South in the mid-1900s was one of the most racist and anti-Semitic places in the world. People being lynched and murdered just because they were seen as second-class citizens, while law enforcement would do nothing. But how does Driving Miss Daisy deal with this? By ignoring it. Despite claiming to be a film about racial tension and overcoming it, Daisy just seems to get over it and become friends with Hoke by association. Another trope of white people solving racism films is that the leads start off racist, but become best friends with the minority character or characters by the film's conclusion. but don't do anything substantial to get there. Daisy is forced to be with Hoke due to the fact her son is employing him, and basically just gets used to Hoke while he smiles and takes care of her. It's not until Daisy's synagogue gets bombed that she realizes, hey, that's not cool. We shouldn't discriminate against someone just because they belong to a different group than them. Oh wait. Suddenly after that she becomes more accepting of Hoke just like that. All along while the film drags on. This is just lazy writing. Something like that coming out of nowhere. So the character is supposed to realize just like this, and it just feels very forced and unnatural. The only other significant time racism is depicted is when Hoke and Daisy are pulled over by racist cops. Suspecting Hoke stole it, even after Daisy clarifies it's hers, the cops still question her due to her Jewish surname, before leaving the two alone. In any other film, this situation would have gone much worse, but the filmmakers decide that's enough for the audiences to see. No need to make them too uncomfortable. The film overall ignores the harsh truths of racism, it being a very small part of the story, really meant for children in the end to teach them racism is bad, but not giving better examples as to why. This is the type of film white audiences love even to this day, a film that pats them on the back and says, you're not the bad guy, racist people are, but offers little on how this problem, especially in America, should be fixed. But this criticism is ignored for the most part, and leaves the wide majority of people praising the film. In the worst win in the 80s and one of the worst Best Picture wins of all time, Driving Miss Daisy won Best Picture at that year's Oscars over Born on the 4th of July, Dead Poets Society, Field of Dreams, and My Left Foot. Despite the fact that even in the lineup it's the weakest film, there was another film about racism that year we all know of that accomplishes everything much more efficiently. I'm talking of course about Do the Right Thing. Take everything I just said about Driving Miss Daisy, and we can say the opposite about this film. Spike Lee is the king when it comes to tackling complex issues about race, when it comes to both the perspectives of Black Americans along with white Americans as well. The many characters of the film really feel like fleshed out people, and while some characters are racist for no apparent reason, others have specific reasons why, while the non-racist characters try to solve things. Not everything goes perfect, and things really escalate, but either way, it shows the dark truth of American society, no matter how terrible the truth can really be. The Academy and film professionals as a whole enjoy these films to an extent, but believes films like these are too radical. Do the Right Thing's Best Picture nomination snub is talked about to this day, but even if it got in, it would have no chance of winning. People during that year were upset Do the Right Thing didn't get in.
We've got 5 great films here, but there is one film missing from this list that deserves to be on it. It might tell the biggest truth of all, and that's Do the Right Thing.
But even if it would have taken Driving Miss Daisy's place, then it still wouldn't have won. Born on the 4th of July would have won. If Born on the 4th of July wouldn't have been nominated, then My Left Foot would have won. If not that, Dead Poets Society, and even if all of those films were absent, Field of Dreams. Screw it. Let's say the whole Best Picture lineup that year and Do the Right Thing were in. It probably still would have been in last place to win. Why? Awarding radical films like Do the Right Thing isn't something the Oscars and the film industry as a whole are willing to award, as they, especially at the time, composed of mainly old white men. They aren't brave enough or willing to award a film that sparks change. Sure, we can give it a couple of nominations, but to award it? Absolutely not. Driving Miss Daisy is the prime example of a white people solving racism film. A safe, bland film that tackles subject matter in the easiest, lightest way possible. That does nothing to tackle the complex issue of racism and prejudice in America. Don't worry though, it would only be a year later until we would see our next example. Dances with Wolves was one of the biggest and best received films of 1990 and won numerous Oscars including Best Picture. Aside from winning over Goodfellas, which is like the greatest film of all time, but that's a topic for a different day, Dances with Wolves has its own set of problems. The film follows a Union Army lieutenant named John Dunbar, who requests to go to an outpost far out in the American West and later befriends a tribe of Lakota Native Americans. Basically, instead of being a weeb for Japan, he's a weeb for Native Americans, if you know what I mean. While very impressive on a technical aspect, despite a relatively simple story, Dances with Wolves glosses over basically all of the atrocities Native Americans have faced once European settlers came to America. In case you don't know, 97% of the total Native American population were wiped out due to disease, war, and violence. Many of these actions perpetrated by the US government, with them not suffering any consequences. Although their population has recovered very slightly, the total population of individuals with Native American blood is 9.7 million, still less than 3% of the total US population. And their struggle still exists to this very day. While there are a few prosperous Native American reservations in the US, like with Mohegan Sun, the rest of them, especially out west, have the highest poverty rates in the US. 40% of housing being considered inadequate, life expectancy being lower than the rest of the US, and having the highest suicide rate out of any other group of people in America. And since reservations aren't considered part of the US, the American government doesn't have to do shit to help out the people it unjustly put there, with the people on the reservations having to raise funding themselves for every little thing like crime enforcement, fire departments, and hospitals, unless the government is directly required to, handicapping this already impoverished group of people tremendously. Pretty bleak stuff, right? But you wouldn't notice from watching a film like Dances with Wolves. Instead, they're just portrayed as tough warriors who are no match for these powerful American forces with their guns and all, and need a brave white guy like Kevin Costner to help them out. Dances with Wolves is one of the most blatant white savior movies. But you see, as the film shows, there are good and bad white people, and also good and bad Native Americans too. So that seems pretty fair. Right? Wrong. The Lakota tribe and the other times we see other tribes are very one-dimensional. The quote-unquote good ones being a wise and mystical group of warriors, and the bad ones as just savage warriors. You can give it a slight pass to Dances with Wolves though, as practically all westerns and other works from white people depict Native Americans this way, not offering much complexity to these characters, instead leaving that to the white characters like Dunbar and the one other white Native American lady he falls in love with. Although the film overall portrays the Sioux and other Native tribes as mistreated groups of people, it still reinforces stereotypes about Native Americans we can still see in media to this very day, because this is what white people were taught. We don't see the full extent of the brutality American Indians face. I mean, no one's trying to make a movie about the Trail of Tears after all. Instead, we just see Native American characters we all have seen before in some other media, which is really disappointing and neglects history people should know about. While Native American representation has become better in recent years with shows like Reservation Dogs highlighting more of these issues, that's just not enough, as since most movies and shows are made by white people, they'll just retrace previous examples of Native American representation like in movies like Dances with Wolves and many others. Despite many studios trying to represent more oppressed groups that have stories to tell that we've never seen before, these projects are usually negatively received or are called woke by grifters online, leading to most being skeptical about films like these and already being negatively received before even being released. But when projects like Prey and Sinners are released and do amazing numbers, it shows how if given the opportunity, minority groups can create some of the best works of media if given the opportunity. But when we actually see movies like Dances with Wolves getting awarded even when competing against true masterpieces like Goodfellas, it demonstrates how white people truly feel, patting themselves on the back by showing they're not all racist, despite the fact they'll forget about this issue the moment movies like this end. The genocide of Native Americans is an issue we should never forget about, especially when there's one happening right now with the people of Palestine and Gaza. And making films that acknowledge this fact help educate people around the world, but not films like Dances with Wolves. Over time, white people solving racism films have been made less and less as minority groups are able to make projects themselves. But even from time to time when they're released, we still see them being awarded compared to actual films tackling issues of race. Which leads us to our third and final entry. Winner of Best Picture in 2018, Green Book is a biographical dramedy about Italian bouncer turned actor Tony Lip, who serves as legendary African-American pianist Don Shirley's chauffeur on his 1962 tour across the south of the US, as the two go from opposites to friends as they challenge racism and problems along the way. Green Book is literally just a race-swapped version of Driving Miss Daisy. What if instead of a black guy driving a white person in the South during the mid-1900s, A white person drove a black guy in the South during the mid 1900s. And basically, every message and plot point is repeated in Green Book as well. Let's get this out of the way. Viggo Mortensen plays one of the most stereotypical Italian Americans I've ever seen. He feels like he's straight out of The Sopranos, which, okay. There's a scene early on where Tony throws away cups that black workers drank from at his house, very blatantly to show that he's racist. And while he's a little uncomfortable around Shirley at the beginning, he just gets used to him and is no longer racist, just like that. Nothing extraordinary happens for Tony to realize this, just like that. There isn't a single scene that shows Tony's changing character. The audience is just supposed to notice this as the movie progresses. This is straight up just lazy writing, and shows the writers really don't understand how people learn that racism isn't bad and isn't helpful. It doesn't show the steps that are supposed to be taken to change, like a film like American History X, but you're supposed to assume he just does. And although Mahershala Ali gives a good performance, nothing compared to Moonlight though. Don Shirley is yet another flat and one-dimensional minority character, despite being based on a real person. This may be due to the fact that Don's family weren't even asked to contribute to this film. They just asked Tony's family for historical context and accuracy, and learning that leaves a little bit of a bitter taste in your mouth. It makes you wonder how accurate this film actually was and how many creative liberties they took when crafting this film. And what was writer-director Peter Farrelly's response to this? He just thought many of his relatives weren't alive. Yeah, that was his excuse. Tony's son Nick, who also wrote the film, said he actually did speak to some family members, but not all of them, and he didn't even consider the fact. But even if what Peter and Nick said was true, it shows that Green Book is far from accurate about what happened. It makes you reconsider everything you watched. And despite apologizing, the viewer doesn't know these things, and most won't do any research after the fact. How do I know? I've talked with many people in real life who've seen Green Book that had no idea about the fact that Don Shirley's family had little involvement, and were surprised to learn that as they really enjoyed the film. And while a decent film, this exactly proves my point. The average viewer doesn't care about whether a film is historically accurate or not. They just watch the film and that's that. They take away the message and experience watching the film, and that's that. That's what makes white people solving racism movies so dangerous, as what the viewer sees is what they get, and helps form thoughts they will hold for years up until someone challenges them or until the rest of their life, which is why films like these do more harm than good. Also, a small tangent that's been discussed before that I want to get out the way. Tony teaching John how to eat fried chicken. Really? Well, what was that about? Honestly. Why was this in the movie? The final 20 minutes or so bring the whole message of the film together. At the literal final concert Don has to perform, they refuse to let him eat in the dining hall because it's segregated. But Tony, no longer racist, decides if they won't let Don eat there, they won't perform. And after they still stand at that, the two men leave in protest. A truly shocking moment. They also get pulled over by a cop, and although they assume he's another racist cop like the previous one earlier in the film, he just tells them they have a flat tire. See? Not all cops are racist after all. And once they return back home, Tony and his family have Don eat dinner together, and they all lived happily ever after, until they died. Aside from being painfully corny and predictable, Green Book shows how easily racism can be overcome if we all just be friendly to one another, despite the fact that solving racism is not as simple as that. Systemic racism in the US prevents many from achieving the same life as many regular white citizens, and the few who surpass this still face their own problems, usually against racist people. Sugarcoating these ideas to appeal to a broader audience has worked in the past, so why change now? And the Oscars that year further prove that. The 91st Academy Awards are easily the worst this decade, mainly due to 3 films dominating in nominations and wins, those being Bohemian Rhapsody, Vice, and of course, Green Book, being the big winner that night, infamously winning Best Picture. There are also quite a few other films that tackled race and inequality that ceremony as well, all of which are better films, those being Roma, Black Panther, and of course, Black Klansman, another Spike Lee film that tackles race and racism in America much better than Green Book. But Green Book still won. Like I said with Driving Miss Daisy, in the end, the Academy, despite being more diverse, in the end, if it has to showcase one film as what they consider the best film, they will always favor the safe pick over the more radical one. Sure, BlacKkKlansman can win adapted screenplay, Black Panther can win a couple of technical prizes, and Roma can win director and cinematography. But Best Picture, arguably the most prestigious prize in film, let's give it to Green Book. An inoffensive film that, despite its flaws, appeals to the widest audience possible. White people solving racism films like these are made to make white people feel better about themselves. Not to challenge social justice or change, but just to say, hey, racism is bad. Nothing more. And after that is said and done, everyone just moves on from this issue to another one. Although more films created by marginalized groups have won Best Picture recently, such as 12 Years a Slave and Moonlight, those seem to be more of one-time wins and not something that starts a big change in Hollywood. The fact is, most people running the film industry would prefer to watch and award films like Driving Miss Daisy, Dances with Wolves, and Green Book, and many other films, instead of actual heart-filled films that show people with little representation in movies. And hey, you too have a voice as well. And if you want to make a movie about you and your life, then go for it. And although things have gone better, there are still plenty of white people solving racism films out there. Essentially just slop films meant to make money and win awards. This is why white people solving racism movies like these suck, and how by not supporting these type of films and supporting filmmakers that actually have something to say, it could lead to a change in the future. Maybe not in the next few years, but maybe in a decade or so that hard work can actually pay off. If you were to take away something from this video, this trope or genre or whatever you want to call this type of movie sucks. Period. Support movies made by Black, Hispanic, Asian, or Native American filmmakers instead of some old white guy making a movie for the box office or Academy Awards. Try to do your part, even if it seems meaningless, because there's plenty of good stories out there for you to discover. Anyways guys, thank you so much for watching this video to the very end. If you enjoyed this video, hit that like button and also hit that subscribe button as we get closer and closer to 1,000 subscribers. Any support or any kind of help is really appreciated. Anyways, that's all I have for you guys this week, and hopefully I'll see you all next time.